Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you can still hear me okay and see the slides. I'm just about to unmute, so I mute you all. And there we go. So welcome to this second Street Manager webinar. Similar format to the first one. We'll give you really an update and a catch up on anything we can think is relevant relating to the Street Manager. So the agenda, we'll just be going through a bit on integration testing, the DfT Position, our progress, reminder of the release schedule, a bit on mobiles, and then the guts of today's meeting is really focusing on the organisation and works transition. And then we'll finish off with just a few things that have arisen since the last meeting, next steps, and then Q&A. So that's the main part of the meeting there. As I said last time, we are on a version of Zoom which is limited to 100 participants. We're fine, we're nowhere near that, that's fine. It might end after about 30 to 40 minutes. If it does, I will just try and start it up again on the same number, so just rejoin. You're all on mute at the moment. If you want to ask a question, just pop it in the chat and we'll try and address those at the end or address them on Slack afterwards. We will put the slides up on Symposium and Slack afterwards. A recording of this session will also be put on, I think, Slack, because there's file restrictions. And of course, the next session along this line will be same time, same place next Wednesday. Moving straight on into the guts of the meeting today. So a little bonus item, which is housekeeping about coronavirus. I'm sure everyone's talking about it all day long. It did get mentioned. We was down at the DfT yesterday for the developers meeting. We have monthly meetings with them. It did get mentioned by Paul Chun, just to say he'd been asked a few times whether it would delay Street Manager, and he said no uncertain terms, no, it will not. Just to update you from our perspective, from Symology perspective, we're obviously like every other organisation, private, public sector ever, reviewing the things relating to coronavirus. The only perhaps difference you might know is we may try and minimise unnecessary face-to-face meetings over the next couple of months, as I'm sure you're doing the same, and perhaps encourage the use of Skype and Teams meetings for that sort of thing. Otherwise, at the moment, we're making sure our staff have resources and the capacity and capability to work from home, make sure everyone's got that in place. One thing you might notice, you may notice at some point, depending on just how serious it gets, there could be a reduced level of sort of first-line support on the telephones, because people may be at home. If you can't get through, or you can't get through the right person, then just feel free to email the person you need to speak to, and if they're working, they'll get back to you. It just may mean they're not in the office if we have to self-isolate some people. I'm sure you're doing the same thing. Also, staff may call you on their own personal mobile or a home line, so please don't call them back on those numbers. Call them back on the number they give you for the office, or email and let them call you. So thanks for that. So otherwise, integration testing, I know it's the same slide as last week, but I'm still saying thank you, because the information that's coming in on Slack is really, really, really useful. Thankfully, a lot of the things that have been reported in the last week or so, the percentage of comments where I can say, yes, we know about that, that's already fixed, is getting a lot higher, which is really, really pleased about. But there are still issues coming through that we're investigating further and passing to our development team. So keep testing. That's really good. I haven't looked at any of the comments from this morning, so I think there's been quite a lot come in. So we're not ignoring you. Just been had some meetings this morning. And to just regurgitate another slide from the seminars before Christmas, where I talked about a narrow window of opportunity. That window is now coming up. A few people have gone live already this week on sort of 3.7.5, and their test system will have been upgraded to sort of the latest version of Insight 3.7.5 and Street Manager. We are doing a new build of the Connection Manager towards the end of this week, which will address another load of issues. And then next week, the bulk of the managed service will be migrating their live system to 3.7.5, and then also their test system to 3.7.5. That version of 3.7.5, production release 2, with the latest Connection Manager, should address the vast majority of the issues you've been having over the last month or so. So it's a really good time to get in there and retest and check they have been addressed and find anything else. We're conscious that during your initial testing, you may have only got so far and then got stuck because you couldn't do a transaction, and therefore, because of that, you wouldn't have done the follow-on transactions from that. So it is important as soon as you get a newer version of 3.7.5 to resume that testing. Anything you find now gives us a chance to fix it before the actual go live Street Manager of the 1st of April. We're still 100% on fixing all those errors, and and adding features, and I'll go through some of the things we have fixed and some of the features that are still to be added in a bit. Moving just on to the DfT, their release strategy. I'm sure many of you think that we're sort of cutting it quite close to the bone with some of the releases, sort of 3 in March and 1 just before go live. DfT are doing the same. No matter what they say, we're all under a lot of pressure, both ourselves, the other developers, the DfT, and yourselves, getting this thing in on the 1st of April. There is going to be a release, an updated release of Street Manager on the 26th of March to Sandbox, and then that release will be pushed through production on Monday, the 30th of March. You could tell we were getting nitty-gritty in because they actually clarified what time of day it would be done. So Thursday afternoon and Monday morning. It doesn't give us a lot of time if there are issues in Sandbox, so we will be checking that out Thursday afternoon and Friday to see if we need any further changes. We've been told no significant changes, but you never know. They are then planning another release for Monday, the 6th of April, which will go in to Sandbox that Thursday. That's presumably to mop up any issues that come up in the first week. So they're trying to cram in as much as they can as well. We also discussed with them yesterday a direct support mechanism. So there's bound to be issues in the first few days with ourselves and the other system integrators, and rather than just sort of raising a ticket via Atlassian and sort of waiting, we will have direct access to some of their technical team so that we can sort of start having private Slacks. And then they offered even an open Zoom channel to be open sort of consistently for the first few days, so we can get straight to their engineers and discuss things. So that's quite reassuring from our point of view, that we should at least have someone to speak to in those first few days. Well, we had a very long and complex discussion about the forward release strategy for Street Manager as far as versioning and that sort of thing is concerned. We talked about the elephant in the room last week about how what is a breaking change and things that can break. So we talked about that quite openly with them, and that's with the DfT and Kainos to propose a solution. And really, they've got to try and balance the need to get features and fixes out there as soon as possible and not sit on them, versus the requirement to not break existing integrations. It's a balance all software providers have to work to. I think at the moment, with the deadline of the 1st of April, they have very much the emphasis on the former. They're trying to get in as much as they can feature-wise and as much as they can bug-wise. I think post 1st of April, we'd like that to move more towards the middle. And I think any conversations you're having with the DfT or in working parties and groups, the more that you can show restraint and acknowledge that something you'd like to be in there, you're happy to wait, and for a release to be done on a date with a known set of things will provide the whole community with less risk in these updates. Because 48 hours between Sandbox and production is not really sustainable going forward. But on the other hand, if Paul's getting pressured by everyone to get Wizzo things in there, that puts him in a difficult position. So the more you can sort of acknowledge that, I'm sure you have it with your other systems and Insight day-to-day system, that you'd like Wizzo things, but actually you want it business as usual to work day in, day out, is probably the most important thing. Sprint 43 we mentioned last time, so that came out last week, that building the gap on the get update service, so we can now get updates for forward plans, section 81s, and historic inspections. So hopefully the update to the connection manager will include that, so we'll have a proper solution there. There is a new get CSV export for road restrictions, so we can get them. At the moment, with all our API users, we can't use it at the moment, so that's with the DfT to just actually work out a way forward on that. So I think that road restrictions are very, very unlikely to be in there for the 1st of April, and that'll be something we do during April. We already knew they did work stream permissions, and I guess many of you have had fun setting up access to your work streams. for the API users. Please keep doing that and keep on top of that, because it's probably the first and most obvious thing that can go wrong. There were 2 bonus features that popped into that release, which we found out about yesterday, that you can now record an actual start without it being granted. You don't have to wait for it to be granted. They put that in there explicitly for the transition, so you could backdate works, enter the permit application, and then grant it then start it without needing to wait for the highway authority to grant it. They've put it in across the board, so effectively that rule that has been in there for sort of 9 months or so, it's just been taken out. And very similarly, a rule we were an issue we raised with them 12 months ago, saying, can you record the start date before the planned start date to reflect what happens in the field? And that was a red line for Paul, but that red line also has gone now. So you, as a works project, you can now record start dates before the planned start date. So rules have been relaxed there. We have to, with both of those, it shouldn't be a breaking change. It's not changing the interface. We will need to just quickly work through the implications. I think someone's raised a message on Slack about the implications of importing that data, and I need to work through that to see if there's any changes required. I mentioned workstream, so those workstream permissions are quite cumbersome for you because you have to set it up on a per user basis, and you need to make sure that our API user has access to all the workstreams you want to allow us access to. And if you add a new workstream that you need our API user to access, you will then need to go in and add that. It's not automatic. If you give us full access to all workstreams, if you add a new workstream, you still need to go and add it in. That release has brought with us 2 new challenges. One perhaps existing. We've identified at the moment we can't seem to record any permits as contractors. Been working with the few of the contractors that have registered their API details that we've seen, I think JSM, SSE Enterprise, and Installcom. We're having problems with permissions on those. We passed that to the DfT. They're now investigating that for us. But if you are a contractor, you probably can't record works at the moment, but we're actively sorting that out. And authority imposed variations seem also to be broken. I'm not quite sure, I haven't tried one on the managed service to see if yours is, but locally they certainly are for us. And again, we're discussing with the DfT to see what the change is there. So it's still quite fluid. Sprint 44 is the release on the 19th. So our understanding of it is they're doing a lot of finishing off on the workstream permissions. Between now and then, it may not be tied into that actual sprint date, is the full NSG implementation. That was supposed to be last sprint, but there had some problems. So the NSG that's in Street Manager is not the finished version. So I think there's private streets and footways that are, perhaps I should say footpaths, that aren't in there at the moment. A few of you have raised issues. We're getting 404 errors for when recording a permit. This is in the troubleshooting guide, but a 404 normally means the USRN is not on file. It can mean other things, but that's the main case. So if you get that, it either means that they haven't put that street in there yet, and they will in the future, or you're perhaps working on an out-of-date gazetteer, which could be the case because at the moment you are using test systems, and so if you haven't had a test system refresh recently, you may be working on streets that aren't in there. Other changes planned for that next release is hopefully to resolve the get updates on activities issue for road restrictions we just talked about earlier. There are an ability to, you can now enter a site, a subsumed site with 0 dimensions. They can let that through, and we can also theoretically be able to pass in a road type. So for streets with multiple owners, part private, part public, we will be able to specify in the interface whether it goes to the private part or the public part, likewise in the download. I think those things are now, when you talk about March the 19th, unlikely that any of that will be included in production release 3, because you're talking literally a few working days before the next release for us and the end of the month. So those are things that we will look to put in place in releases after the 1st of April. So I'm just going to go through a few of the things that we've done since really the test release at the end of January. So I've put down new features and some errors we've fixed in production release 2. The vast majority of these were fixed in production release 1 that was available on Monday, and some of you are already on. I just didn't have time to work out exactly which ones weren't. So I've done the production release 2. So the things at the end of the week, which should be done. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but they're there for the slides for you to look afterwards. But these are just some of the high level features. We're now always assuming permitting if you're in a street manager world. The authority imposed variations, works extension, duration challenge, PMRs, and cancelling permits all were a little bit iffy at times, didn't quite fully work. So we've hopefully finished all those areas. Amending surface locations on the details tab, particularly important for those with works management interfaces, with firing the works in and then couldn't add those in afterwards. We've had some issues or some features to do to align the working day with Street Manager, which changes things there a bit. And also with the new connection manager build towards the end of this week, we'll sort out the daylight saving time issues. If anyone's raised a permit for the summertime, they'll have noticed perhaps a few issues with times. And then a series of bugs that have been fixed. The biggest one was for a number of promoters, you were getting client connection manager responses invalid when trying to record permits. We seem to have got around that now. Temporarily, in one of the releases, the 28th, the second release, conditions went missing. They weren't coming up and down. And then there's a whole range of other things that we fixed. Perhaps the biggest one on there is recording major works. The follow-up notice wasn't coming down as a 10-day, it was coming down as a variation, which had all sorts of knock-on effects for us. I'm being given a 10-minute warning by Zoom, so we'll have to finish in 10 minutes and perhaps start up again. Just to keep it up to date. And then a few more bugs fixed. A lot of you reported in the initial release how for non-Street Manager transactions, we were still trying to call Street Manager. We hadn't put the code in there to stop that. So recording license and events, intention to issue license, unattributable works, and a few others. And then also final registrations were being sent as partials. So quite a lot of, hopefully the bugs you've reported are fixed. Some of the remaining features that we have to do, and these are ones where we are planning to get these ones in before go live. The new version that's out there at the moment, production release 1 and 2, does include defective apparatus. It's not completely finished, but most of the things that go wrong, you're probably less likely to notice. We've got some tidying up to do there. We need to be able to send Eaton inspections and Eaton FPNs to Street Manager for after the transition. We'll try and get that into that release. Get forward plans I mentioned earlier. A change so that if you receive a works on an OD that doesn't exist in your system, to create that OD on the fly. There's no concept of sending OD files around anymore. So if a works promoter creates a new district, or there's a new organisation completely entirely, at the moment when you receive that, that will get rejected, and you'll then need to create that manually. We'll put a change in there to create that. We'll mention the next one later. We'll try to default the plan start and end date on a resurrect works to the original previous phase, so that when you're doing the transitions, we'll mention a bit, that will save you quite a lot of keying in for that process. Transferring across the originator contact, we just do the contractor contact at the moment. Enabling the excavation type on in progress works, because you can't change it as part of the works end transaction anymore, but Eaton didn't allow you to change it beforehand on when works are started, so we need to re-enable that. Otherwise, once you start, you can't change the excavation type. And a few of you have noticed that RTN inspections are coming down as UC inspections, so we will resolve that. Otherwise, just a reminder of the release schedule. So production release 1 came out on Monday. Technical staff are doing locally hosted upgrades for that, and there's been a few early adopters on the managed service who have been upgraded to that and are now running that with their live system, but not with the Street Manager integration. Then next week, we will take another cut, and then we will upgrade the rest of the managed service. And then at the end of the month, production release 3, and this is the one you need to be on really for go live. And again, we will push that out to managed service over that weekend. There are no mobile changes planned for that release. There are some planned for the end of this week, which I'll mention in a bit. So recommend you plan for release 3, managed service, you're fine, we will do that for you. If you're locally hosted, plan that in. and you have time between the 27th and the 31st of March, it is just a program update. There should be no change to any of the third-party products or web services. So just a reminder of some of the things for release 3 that are not going to be in the 1st of April. We've mentioned a few already. Downloading road restrictions, completion and registration of non-notifiable works and phases. There are some designation periodicity codes, whether it's the timing of those we need to add in, greater than 500 character responses, the multi-owner streets and substitute sites we mentioned earlier, and a number of cosmetic enhancements. And we'll schedule those in as soon as possible after the 1st of April. Next, mobiles. So we said last time that the upgrade to 375 is also an upgrade of the mobiles and an upgrade of the database, and there's no backward compatibility between the versions. So you do need to, in some cases, delete that database before doing the upgrade. But also in particular, you must send all transactions from your devices before the upgrade begins, otherwise that work will be lost. I'm sure you all do that as a matter of course anyway, but there is no safety net of sending it after the upgrade. So make sure you do that before the upgrade takes place. There have been numerous ongoing issues with Insight Mobile. We've got ourselves in a bit of a pickle with this, but we think we've resolved all the reported issues so far. There was a new build of Insight 3757 that was completed last week that went out, and we have since then found a new problem with GPS that was reported yesterday. There was a workaround to disable the GPS. We're working on a fix to that, and we should have that sorted by the end of the week, and that will be 3758. If it's not resolved, it pretty should be. We will still be doing the upgrade anyway. You may just need to temporarily disable your GPS, but I'm hoping we have that resolved very soon. For those of you on locally hosted systems, if you're doing upgrading the mobile web services, there was a release of them on a release date of the 26th of February. The new mobile software is only compatible with the release of the mobile web services from the 26th of February onwards. This has caught us out a few times on the managed service as well, because most of the user base was on a version before that, and some people have sort of almost inadvertently, accidentally had their Insight mobiles updated. So if you are getting fairly significant, I think it's a send object error when trying to do a receive, if you want to do mobile testing, you'll have to speak to your account manager to get your web services upgraded, or wait till next week when it will be done as a matter of course anyway. Okay, I'm gonna move on to organisation transition. What I'm probably going to do first is just, because we started a bit early and we're taking a bit of time, I think this meeting is now going to expire and kick everyone out. So I think what I'll do is I'll end the meeting and then start it back up again. I think that works, and we'll do it now at a nice point in time rather than sort of just halfway through my conversation. So I will. You're all unmuted again now, so sorry about that. Come back on again in a moment, please. Yeah, that's all right.